Good evening and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. It's evening here, but I'm suspecting from my guest Michael Erath, who's sitting in a beautiful green room in front of me, that it might be the middle of the day. Hi, Michael, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. And yourself?
Good, 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 good. Where are you in the world and what time is it?
It is 10 a.m. We are in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right, okay, so you're way over, aren't you? Way over to
Yeah,
the.
southwest corner, and it's hotter than hell here now.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Michael, because I know you've got lots of things to talk about around business rather than personal resilience today, which is a refreshing change for us. So talk a little bit about your own background.
Yeah, so in my background, I was second generation in a family manufacturing business. We manufactured hardwood veneers for the furniture industry, kitchen cabinet, door and panel industries, yacht manufacturers, people like that.
Proper
And
business.
sorry.
A proper business.
Correct. So we would buy hardwood logs, and we had a processing facility in Virginia on the East Coast where I grew up, and we would process the veneer, and then we were selling. Primarily, when I first was involved in the business, we were primarily selling domestic into the furniture industry here.
Mm.
And in the late 1990s was when many of the US manufacturers and I think even European began moving to Asia, primarily
Yeah.
China, then eventually Vietnam, Southeast Asia. And so we had to pivot the business to really becoming an exporting business. And that was at a time when my father was stepping out of the business and I was taking over. So I kind of the first phase was to transition the business from a domestic company to a net exporting company. Fast forward several years, we ended up with offices on 6 continents, everywhere but Antarctica. And one of the things that was a challenge for us, as often is the case in the veneer business, because the log quality that we require is the top quality of what comes out of the forest. It's a fraction of a percentage of what comes out. So sourcing raw materials was difficult. And I had a vision of taking the business through a vertical integration to get closer to the raw material source. And in
Mm.
doing so, I brought on a partner who had a background in timber merchandising. He had worked for a company that was exporting lower grade logs all over the world for flooring
Mm.
companies and more lumber utilization. So we started buying standing timber and we got much closer to the timber source, which was really a beautiful model because we could get the better veneer quality logs at a lower cost. We would buy large parcels of timber and we would merchandise everything we didn't want to produce.
Mm.
So my partner and I became best friends. I became his son's godfather. We vacationed with our families frequently.
Ah.
And in 2000, the very end of 2008, as the housing market was starting to collapse here in the US, I found out not only had he embezzled $500,000 in the prior 18 months, but he was committing bank fraud.
Ooh.
Literally went from one moment, one of my best friends, business partner, to finding out this had been going on. And so a little bit of the story around this, we had two separate entities. There was a business entity that he was the managing director of, which was the timber merchandising side of the business, and then our production side, which was the family business that I was running.
Mm.
And so he was only a partner in the timber merchandising business, but both businesses banked with the same lender. And
Ah.
at that time, everything we supplied was dependent upon the housing market. And so both businesses began to suffer from a revenue perspective. But about a year prior to this happening, on the manufacturing business side, I took out a 6 million US term note and bought new machinery. We expanded the factory, we added a production line. And so we were reinvesting in our production capacity because leading up to that, 2006, 2007, the economy was quite strong.
Yeah.
So my father had passed. He passed in 2003. This is now 2008. We had transacted in 2008. We transacted my mother out of the business. So I was the sole owner, but she was still stuck on the bank guarantee. Well, when
Ah.
we realized my partner had been committing bank fraud, we had to go to the US Attorney's Office with the information and also to the bank. Both of the businesses banked with the same lender, who immediately, of course, froze all of our accounts.
Yeah.
So, in a declining economy, we also became insolvent overnight when this happened. Um, so that was kind of I believe I was 37. Yeah, I was 37 at the time. That was the situation I had to be dealt with. Um, what was interesting at the time, I was trying to figure out what, if any, leverage I had in negotiating with the bank. Because if
Mm.
everything got forced immediately into bankruptcy, all this veneer equipment that was incredibly expensive would have sold for nothing at auction. And with my mother stuck on the guarantee, she was at risk now. And she was also no longer a stakeholder in the business. So it was a very odd dichotomy. So in the US at that time, most companies that were in serious financial trouble were essentially giving the keys to the bank and allowing
Yeah.
the lawyers to fight it out. And I
Mm.
think that happened somewhat globally. Um, so that actually became my leverage. We owed the bank enough money that it was going to be painful for them to write that off.
Mm.
And I don't know if you have a different name for it in Europe, but the special assets group is the group in the bank that wants to get rid of bad assets.
Yeah.
That's their job. So we went from the friendly banking relationship to now working with the special assets group.
Yeah.
And I went to them and I offered them, I explained that obviously this, the collateral they had was worthless if they forced it into an auction, but that if they would give me only on the manufacturing side, if they would give me just enough liquidity to slowly unwind the business in a
Mm.
more economical manner, while I couldn't make any guarantees, I knew they would get more out of that than not. And
Yeah.
so I think at the moment I was one less fire to fight.
Yeah.
So they agreed. And I spent the next 18 months every other week having to meet in person with the special assets group, which was a miserable experience, but a phenomenal education at the same time. I had some very, very fortunate breaks, and was actually able to liquidate things in a way that I got the bank made whole and I got the creditors made whole. So my wife and I, being in our late 30s, we decided we would take the haircut if we could just live to fight another day.
Mm.
And so it fortunately for us, over a very difficult 18-month period, did work out that way. And we were able to then relocate, restart a new business in the same industry. We found a contract manufacturer where we could outsource our production, so we
Yeah.
didn't have the massive capital investment, and we were able to start over and rebuild another business.
And what you're saying there is quite interesting because you talked about two things. One, which is that there's a massive, there are three different things. One, which is you've got the problem lots of entrepreneurs do is that they become friends with their business partners, and that's a
Mm.
very dangerous thing. And especially you having come out of a family business, I guess there was almost that
Yeah.
perpetuation of a family culture.
Yes.
Um, and I think the second thing is that there's something about I can see that you thoroughly enjoyed that period of working with that terrible group of bankers because actually turning a business round is actually fascinating, isn't it? And a lot of people
Yeah.
say that actually it would have been very easy for you to give up and walk away, but it
Yes.
is far more interesting to turn it around. And people specialize in that, don't they? They really do. They get bored by this sort of the
Right.
easy to run businesses. So I'm guessing for
Yes.
an entrepreneur like you, that was heaven sent almost that crash.
What's interesting is with and always with the benefit of hindsight, connecting the dots is more clear. So during the that time, it was a fantastically miserable experience, but as I mentioned, I learned so much from that,
Mm.
and it really shaped how I chose to build not only the next business, to make it more resilient, and also to take all of those lessons I had learned. But then when I realized in 2015 that I had some very unique experiences and learnings throughout my entrepreneurial journey,
Mm.
that I could actually provide more financial success for my family, experience more joy for myself, and be a benefit to more people if I transitioned into a coaching and consulting type role where I could share what I've learned with more and more people. So I exited that business and started going down the path of coaching executives and executive teams around how to better systemize their businesses and build elite organizations.
But that's interesting in itself, and I totally get it. I work in the services arena myself. But there's something very satisfying about getting back into doing an interim job, getting back in, having products, having inventory, having,
Mm-hmm.
a retail front end, having hundreds and thousands of staff really fixing it. I often think sometimes, it's nice to go in and out, isn't it? Do you miss that hands-on sort of raw, entrepreneurial risk that you get from a product business?
Yes, and it's interesting. So in the timber industry, we often say you get splinters you can never remove, right?
Yeah,
There's
good
just
one.
there's something about
Yeah.
that I do in fact miss. And what's so often what happens in the cases of entrepreneurs who do then transition into some sort of coaching or consulting is they kind of become a solo practitioner.
Mm,
And I did that for the first 4 years up until 2019. And what I realized was now my inventory was my calendar and it
yeah.
was finite. And
Time for dollars.
once my calendar's full, I can't grow. And that was
Yeah.
very frustrating because it's not my nature. And so I actually started building out a firm of business guides and
Mm,
taking the systems and the approach and how I was working with executives and their teams and actually built that out as an approach or a framework that now there are a total of 10 of us, potentially growing a little bit beyond that are doing this work under the entity that I now have. So it's not product based to the same extent, which I do in fact miss. What I really
mm,
miss is manufacturing, turning something into something
yeah.
else,
Yeah.
and that value add component to production and manufacturing.
Yes. So I'm looking at your website, looking at
Mhm.
the 10 pictures or whatever they are. And it's quite nice to see that's obviously the same photographer's taken the photograph and got the same smile out of everybody. It's actually
Right.
quite a relief to see is Elizabeth sitting above them. So just for a bit
Yeah,
of
yeah. So
variety,
Elizabeth's my wife, and
I thought she
Fifi
must be.
is our French bulldog, and she's our company mascot.
You mean Fifi,
The dog,
not your
yeah,
wife.
Fifi, not the wife. Well said.
So, I mean, most people are familiar, very familiar with the way service businesses run, how you grow and scale them. So that's absolutely fine. But I'm wondering when you think back on that sort of family thing, and that risk thing, that trusting your partners and such like. I mean, what lessons did you learn from that? Because it's been able to give people indicators about what to look for that's most important. And sometimes you only see those things in hindsight, don't you? What was the thing that led you to check in the first place?
Yeah. So as business was as things were slowing down economically, the especially this timber trading company, the merchandising company, was having significant cash flow problems.
Mm,
And the cash flow problems they were having seemed more extreme than the financial statements would indicate.
right.
So I offered, and my CFO, and this was one mistake I had made, is in the manufacturing business, I had a CFO who was fantastic. I allowed my partner and friend to convince me to have the controller in that business, because that business did not have a CFO, to have the controller in that business report to him as the managing director instead of to the CFO.
I see.
That was one mistake I made. And that was just basically trusting him too much and
Yeah,
not really being disciplined about what organizational structure should look like.
yeah.
So that was a mistake I made.
And it's
So
interesting you say that, isn't it? Because just because you trust someone doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply due process to
correct.
that board of
Exactly.
directors, isn't it?
100%. And I think that's one of the big lessons when it's family or friendship
Mm,
is do not do things that do not make sense if it were
mm.
not a family business,
Yeah,
only because it's a family business or a friendship partnership. And
yeah.
so what ended up happening in the first book I wrote in 2017 called Rise is exactly the story. So when the when that company was having cash flow problems, I offered to look at the daily registers. We were using Peachtree as our accounting software. So every day the controller would send me the Peachtree register so I could see all of the deposits, I could see all of the disbursements, I could see the AR. And so I was trying to wrap my head around where the cash is going. And it was interesting in hindsight, they were very trepidatious to let me do that.
That's a good sign. That's
So I
something to look
start
out for, isn't it?
right.
Yeah.
If is again, if your senses, like our instincts rarely serve us poorly,
Yeah.
right? But I overlooked my instincts because of my friendship. I was letting myself be too blinded by that. But what we found out, so I was looking at these PDF reports from Peachtree. And for example, we were shipping on average about 200 containers per month, exporting from the company. So our bills to our freight forwarder were typically 15, 20, $25,000 invoices. So everything looked in order when I was looking through these registers of the account, but I wasn't going back and going through all the checks and matching the checks
Yeah.
to the register. The controller who reported to my partner was doing that. What we found out in hindsight was he was building an addition on his home, which was
Oh,
most of the $500,000 was an addition to his home, and he was paying the contractor through the company.
excellent.
But the controller was reclassifying the invoices from when she paid the contractor, she was reclassifying them as freight invoices to our freight forwarder. So
So this is fraud. This
when
is
I
pure
saw those,
fraud.
pure fraud.
Yeah.
So when I saw those invoices, I thought nothing of it, but I wasn't comparing the checks. So one of the things that happened in the investigation with the U.S. Attorney's Office was why would she commit fraud
Mm.
on his behalf? What was in it for her? They found out that the two of them were having an affair.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was inevitable, wasn't it?
There were two sets of financial statements, emails between them about which financial statements they wanted me to see from one month to the next. It unraveled this unbelievable complexity of fraud and deceit, and it was unbelievable.
So it is interesting, and I talk a lot about this, and I work with lots of organizations where you go, and you often find that the leadership team is constrained by friendships. They're
Mm.
constrained by like a sunk cost in the value of the relationship that built the firm. I mean, I've always been a believer that you shouldn't have friends in business. You shouldn't have friends when you become at a senior level. And
Mm.
that becomes particularly, and excuse me for saying this, that becomes particularly risky when you have a family partner as part of the top team, isn't it?
Yes.
Because actually, it's very hard to apply a check and balance on a wife or a partner, a son, or
Right.
that's where it really gets tricky, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. And one of the things that, and this is part of the new book that I've written, Five Obsessions of Elite Organizations, is that in all businesses, but especially in those situations, I think it's helpful to have, if you think about your organizational chart as more of an accountability chart, which is
Yeah.
a concept made popular by Gino Wickman and with EOS and his book Traction in 2007. We've taken an evolution to that, and I think if you would imagine every role in your organization having two key components as part of that accountability chart. Number one, what in one sentence, what is the high level mission that has to be accomplished for the role to be successful?
Mm.
And really clearly defining that because that becomes something you can measure against. And then
Can you give me an example?
yeah, so for example, and at an executive level, they're really quite obvious, but they also are incredibly clear. So for example, if you and I were partners in a business, but we were not going to be actually employees, we were going to hire a CEO and an executive team. My guess is we would want as a high level mission for our CEO something like ensure the consistent growth of enterprise value to meet or exceed expectations by guiding the long-term strategy and
Yeah.
execution, something like that, or return
Yeah.
on invested capital, some value-based measure. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what are we paying the CEO for, right? So
Yeah.
now if the CEO is going to build out a team, and let's just say chief revenue officer, chief operations, chief finance.
Yeah.
So a chief revenue officer may have a mission as obvious as consistently meet or exceed revenue dollars to budget,
Yeah.
or guide the marketing and sales strategy and plans to consistently meet or exceed revenue.
Yeah.
Seems incredibly obvious, almost too simple.
Mm.
But how many organizations do you know with someone who's accountable for revenue, who consistently misses our budgets and forecasts,
Yeah.
and they continue to be for year after year after year? That's their role. Chief operations officer might be something like ensure the consistent on brand production or delivery of services and quality in a safe working environment. So,
Mm.
again, some sort of a high level mission, which all then lead to the second component, which is the most critical outcome that we teach. And so the idea of the most critical outcome is based on that mission. What is not a leading indicator, but an outcome based measure that is binary and can be measured that proves success in that mission, right? So if we agree on the beginning, we're going to hire a CEO, and we agree this is the calculation we're going to use as a baseline for enterprise value.
Yeah.
And every year we're going to remeasure that. Every quarter we're going to remeasure that and set goals, and we're going to measure progress against it. If I'm the CEO and I don't have clarity on something like that, I'm probably very focused on EBITDA and
Yeah.
growing our EBITDA.
Yeah.
If, however, it's around enterprise value or return on invested capital, I'm now beginning to think the biggest things I can do to impact enterprise value are things strategically that will improve our multiple in the marketplace, whether we want to sell or not. So now I'm thinking bigger picture strategy on things that over time will help drive a higher multiple, which are probably much better for the business long term anyway, whether we sell or not.
Yeah.
Chief revenue officer obviously would be something like revenue dollars to budget, meet or exceed that. Super simple.
They're quite easy, aren't they?
Right. And chief operating officer might be something like net operating income percentage to goal.
Yeah.
And one thing that I have found over time, I used to think net operating income dollars to goal. But one of the things I observed was if a chief revenue officer was missing their target, the chief operating officer would often assume that it's not possible to reach the dollars that we budgeted for net operating income because we don't have enough revenue, and therefore they're not as disciplined and as quick to move.
Yeah.
But if they're thinking percentage instead of dollars and they see the revenue drop, can they still maintain that operating income percentage, which forces them very quickly into an efficiency mindset? So having those things, and then the difficult one that's a little bit nuanced is a chief financial officer, because a CFO often doesn't have control over the inputs of cash flow and EBITDA. They're a reporting and analysis role. So I often like to suggest that a most critical outcome for a chief financial officer might be net cash flow dollars to goal. Meaning we prepare our budgets, we prepare our cash flow forecasts. And the reason that I personally like that one as a recommendation is I want my CFO to always be 90 plus days ahead of the company on cash flow forecasting. Yeah. And as soon as they see a concern on future cash flow, I want them in our meetings being vocal and speaking up and calling it to our attention so we can be prepared for that and begin to make decisions before we get caught in a poor cash position.
So one of the things that you're talking about here, and which is really important here, is so you're talking a lot about the measurement of performance, but you've got to deliver it, and that's the culture of performance, isn't it? And that says a lot about leadership. And I find that most organizations are quite poor at leadership, so they end up with a culture they've sort of flopped around developing rather than one that you actually want. So how do you build that performance-based culture?
I think that's an absolutely great point. I think there are two key components of that is having clarity on these expectations for every role, and then having a process. We recommend something we call quarterly calibrations. Some companies do them semi-annually. It's whatever's the right cadence for you. But having a very defined and systemized process by which, without taking too much time, these are usually 15 to 20-minute meetings. If I'm your direct report, I would come to one of these calibrations with you. If you think about a piece of machinery, right? If we don't
Yeah.
recalibrate frequently, it underperforms. They have to be well calibrated to perform well. People are no different. So if I report to you as my boss, Russell, I would come to this meeting prepared to discuss our core values and how I believe I've been doing relative to our core values, meeting the expectation, maybe talking about some things I've done to really try to lean into certain core values. You're going to give me feedback on how you've observed me also relative to our core values. And the three components I look at are either the person is generally exceeding expectations, generally meeting expectations, generally failing to meet. The other side is on the performance. So over the last quarter, how consistently do I feel like I've done a great job achieving my mission and meeting my most critical outcome? You're going to give me feedback on the same thing. As long as I'm meeting or exceeding expectations, we just want to maintain that. But if there are specific areas where I'm failing to meet expectations, now the second piece of a culture of performance has to kick in. We need to have a defined system by which we either coach people up or coach people out. And so I believe if someone fits our values and generally is a good cultural fit, we owe it to them to give them the coaching and the development and the training to try to build them up. But some people are not coachable. And some people maybe don't have the aptitude for the role. And so we have to have a system so that it's not discretionary based on who the manager is. And it takes some of the emotion out of dealing with performance issues with people and go through a systemized approach to how we coach them up or coach them out. And we've got a tool we teach called 7 People Solutions that I learned from a colleague of mine named Tip Quilter, who which really gives you 7 steps of increasing intensity to work through performance issues with people.
Yes. So it's interesting. So you're describing almost a classic people, process, finance, systems approach and culture, which is great. And you talk about value as well.
Right.
And it's all predicated. I mean, it's all fantastically good common sense because that's great. And you use the analogy of machine, manufacturing, which is even better. But why write a book? I mean, I know it's the obvious thing about because that's the easiest passive income stream that you can do. So who did you write? Well, let's start with who did you write it for?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. So the book serves a few purposes. Obviously, most books are written by people like me as a business development tool to help get out the message of what it is that you're doing. But one of the things I wanted to do also is typically for a company to be a good fit to work with one of us as partners, they need to be at least at 5 million in revenue US, unless they have really good cash flow and good margins, perhaps a little smaller. But that's a small percentage of businesses, of privately held businesses. And so in writing the book, I wanted to give away much of the foundational not only tools, but how to use the tools. I think there are a lot of great books out there, but they stop at the theory or the conceptual level. They don't actually walk you through how to do it within your business. And so this book was really also written for those smaller businesses that have aspirations to grow and do want to be truly elite businesses. They can't afford a full-time coach or guide to come in and work with them, but they still need resources. So I really wrote the book as almost a field guide to help those businesses. And I also created an AI clone of myself that serves as a companion to the book. So for people that want to use it, they can use the book and figure it out themselves. They can use the book and the clone to get customized guidance and deeper insights. And for those that can afford it and feel like it's of value, they can reach out to one of us to work with us as guides.
And you just need to remind me of the title again and where I might be able to buy it.
Yeah,
In
so the
fact,
book.
I've just bought it, so
Okay, yeah,
that's even worse, isn't it?
Right, the book came out in March of 2025. So been out about 3 months, just about 3 months now. It's available on Amazon and Audible. you can also find it with a little bit of information and the downloadable resources at 5obsessions.com. The name of the book is 5 Obsessions of Elite Organizations. So you can find it there, also on our website, nextlevelgrowth.com.
And and I noticed that some of your reviews are from non-profits as well as
Mm-hmm.
profits. So
Yes.
it's obviously got good common sense
Yeah,
through it by the
we
sound
work
of it.
with a number of nonprofits as well.
Good. Okay, so people want to get hold of you, you better give us your contact details and all
Yeah,
that sort of stuff. So
the best way, and it's all over the book as well, but the best way is nextlevelgrowth.com. That website walks through our approach. There is an assessment there. It's called the Elite Organizations Assessment. So it's 10 questions each around the 5 principles or the 5 obsessions of elite organizations. And so anybody can take that assessment and reach out to one of our partners. They'll be happy to give you half an hour of their time to walk through the results, and help you understand how to use the book to help address any areas where you feel like you can improve. That's the best way to get to that. If you ever want to test drive the AI clone, there's a free trial associated, and the website for that is just askmichaelerath.com.
I'm definitely going to do that.
Okay, great.
Michael, it's been a joy. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Absolutely,
Really,
Russell. Thank you. It was
really
a great interview.
practical stuff. So, enjoy the rest of your day and you take care.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.